Good morning. Good morning. For those here in the hall and for those online, welcome. Thank you to Val Cochran, longtime member and volunteer in so many capacities for ringing our chimes this morning. My name is Samantha McCoy. I am currently your chair of the Sunday services team. I've been a member here since I think it was December of 2003 when I signed the book, and I've had the joy of working with the religious education ministry team in various capacities and serving on our board of trustees over the years. So, welcome. The Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Danbury has been gathering together for 200 years. And as we work to build a more just world, we respectfully acknowledge that our physical building is on the traditional land of the Paugussett people. We're so glad that you're able to join us this morning because you, all of you, are an essential part of our community. And whether this is the first time you're with us, the 20th time, or the 100th time, we're so grateful that you're here today. And we are stronger because you are here. If you're new to our community and you're joining us online, we invite you to introduce yourself and where you're connecting from in the chat box on Zoom as you are comfortable. And at the conclusion of today's service, you'll have the chance to participate in a breakout group for individual connections and deeper check-ins. If you're new here and you're in person, we welcome you to fill out a visitor card at the table in the entry hall. And please consider staying for a little while after the service for coffee and chatting and getting to know us. We'd love to learn more about you. Today's announcements. To start, we are so lucky to have Tom Krattenmaker here as our guest speaker today. He is with us in the hall. We've had so many online visitors, it's kind of exciting to have a guest speaker here in person. In addition to Tom's work as the communications director at Yale Divinity School, he is also a writer who specializes in religion, meaning, and exploring values in public life. He's been a longtime columnist for USA Today, and he's the author of various books. He's a former board member of the Yale Humanist Community. Currently, he's a columnist for the online magazine Only Sky. And looking ahead just a little bit at the services that are coming up, our own Randy Becker will be leading us next week, and we're excited to hear that service. And our minister, Reverend Kathleen, will be back on February the 12th. The other announcements today relate to the bicentennial auction, and you'll see some info start to pop up on your screen. You may have also received, hold on, let me find it. You may have received one of these if you walked in the door today. It has everything you need to know to take part in our auction experience, but I'll just point out a few of the key things. Our Bidding Owl website, which is how you interact and actually purchase things in the auction, is going to go live this week, and bidding will actually begin on February the 3rd. So we highly encourage you to check that out. We encourage you to buy a ticket to the auction, even if you're not sure if you're going to buy anything. Even just attending with your ticket, you're supporting our community and supporting our largest fundraiser of the year. The actual auction takes place via Zoom, and that is on February the 11th from 6 to 8 p.m. We know that between Jerry and Peter, there's a whole array of things being planned. And I heard a few little bits this morning as I was coming in. So it's sure to be a fun time, and I encourage you to take part. As we move towards our service, though, we'll remind ourselves that we are one people of many beliefs, many origins, sexualities, and genders. We're all growing, we're all learning, and all loved. And just as you are welcome here. And in that spirit, we will move into a moment of greeting. I encourage you, if you are here in the hall with us, to take a moment to say hello and connect with the folks sitting near you. If you're online, feel free to drop a note in the chat box and check in with the people there as well. So now we'll transition to our our hymn of welcome. It's time to transition now to our hymn of welcome, although I love that enthusiastic greeting. There was so much greeting going on here in the hall, and I hope there was online as well. So we encourage you to join us now and to stand as you are able in hymn number 368. Now let us sing. And now I invite Ginny Cameron to come forward. She's going to light the chalice for us this morning as we all partake in our chalice lighting affirmation. Love is the spirit of this congregation, and justice is its light. This is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek and speak the truth in love, to help one another and celebrate life.
Hello, good morning. I'm going to let you know that I have some medical equipment on my body that is alarming, but it's been taken care of. It just takes a few minutes. So if it goes off, no need for concern. All is well. Let's say together our words of our children's affirmation, which are not on the screen right now, but hopefully will be on the screen in just a minute, and are in your order of service as well. We are Unitarian Universalists. We are people with open minds, loving hearts, and helping hands. We care for the earth and each other. Today, I want to revisit a story that I told a couple years ago because it's worth revisiting every now and then. I know some of you will remember this. I know Melody, if you're online, I haven't seen Melody in here this morning, but Melody told me that she remembered it when I wore my butterfly costume on Halloween. A couple of years ago, I shared something with this community that my colleague Joy Berry taught me, which is that when caterpillars go into a chrysalis, they don't just grow wings and stuff on their caterpillar bodies. Joy told me that when a caterpillar egg is laid on a leaf by a butterfly mother, every cell inside the baby caterpillar has the DNA or the recipe for two different kinds of bodies. the caterpillar body and the butterfly body. And then when the caterpillar goes into the chrysalis, its body completely breaks down until it becomes mushy, like a goo. I forgot to bring my goo in here, but just imagine my goo with you right now. It's almost hard to imagine. Joy suggested we might try to imagine being little caterpillars hanging upside down by a thread. Can you imagine that? Inside a chrysalis, feeling our caterpillar body become still and then break down. A caterpillar probably doesn't know what's happening to it, doesn't know that this future that it has will be as a butterfly, that it will have beautiful, colorful patterns and the ability to fly. If it knows anything at all, Joy said, it's just that it's time to let go. And Joy told me to imagine that if caterpillars could talk, that they might say, let go and let goo. You know how sometimes people who believe that God's in charge of everything and has a plan says, let go and let God. We don't know what this whole event feels like for a caterpillar, but when human beings experience a whole bunch of change, a lot of times we get nervous. I wonder if it's different for a caterpillar. If everything seems like it's breaking down for a person, if things are getting different to the point of being mushy, it tends to feel like the end of everything. But when the body of the caterpillar is broken down, there are these cells that can turn into all the things that caterpillar never had, that can create a new body with wings and everything. It takes turning to goo in order to do it. Anybody remember what the cells inside the body that can imagine into a butterfly, what those cells are called? Imaginal cells. They're called imaginal cells. Stem cells was a good guess. The job of imaginal cells is basically to imagine the broken down caterpillar into something new. So this is why my colleague Joy thinks we should all know about letting go and letting goo. Joy said this, human beings often find transformation hard. We find the unknown hard. We aren't comfortable with being mushy. But change is happening all the time. And even when we feel like we can't move, like we're in this puddle of goo, like we can't lift a finger to control what's happening, the ability to believe that something amazing is happening inside us or around us, something that is changing us or the world, is a special kind of magic. In caterpillars, it takes imaginal cells. And in people, it takes a special kind of imagination. Some people call it hope. Some people call it trust. Some people call it faith. So ends the story from my colleague Joy. Let's sing together This Little Light of Mine.
I'm gonna
Now's the time in our service when we move into a period of reflection and we share milestones from our lives, whether they be joys or sorrows, things weighing on us, or great celebrations. We'll do that in two phases. We'll do a silent round where if you're here in the fellowship hall, I invite you to come up and place a stone in the bowl. If you're at home, maybe you have your own bowl or another way of marking your milestone. Those online can also feel free to put milestones in the chat if you would like me to read them during the spoken portion. So let's take a few moments for silent milestones. Bowl to settle us, I'll ring it again, and after that second time, Jerry will take us into Spirit of Life. So I invite you to settle in your seat, take a few deep breaths, and enjoy the quiet. We'll now have a reading, and it's a reading on hope. It's by the author Rebecca Solnit. This was recommended by Tom, our speaker, and I pulled some excerpts for us to consider this morning. Her full piece is titled Hope is an Embrace of the Unknown. It's important to say what hope is not. It is not the belief that everything was, is, or will be fine. The evidence is all around us of tremendous suffering and destruction. The hope that I'm interested in is about broad perspectives with specific possibilities, ones that invite or demand that we act. It is also not a sunny, everything is getting better narrative, though it may be counter to the everything is getting worse one. You could call it an account of complexities and uncertainties with openings. Hope locates itself in the premise that we don't know what will happen, and that in the spaciousness of uncertainty, there's room to act. When you recognize uncertainty, you recognize that you may be able to influence the outcomes. You alone, or you in concert with a few dozen or several million others. Hope is an embrace of the unknown and the unknowable, an alternative to the certainty of both optimists and pessimists. Optimists think it will all be fine without our involvement. Pessimists adopt the opposite position, and both excuse themselves from acting. It's the belief that what we do matters, even though how and when it may matter, who and what it may impact, are not things that we can know beforehand. We may not, in fact, know them afterwards either, but they matter all the same. And history is full of people whose influence was most powerful after they were gone. Ideas at first considered outrageous or ridiculous or extreme gradually become what people think they've always believed. How the transformation happened is rarely remembered, in part because it's compromising. It recalls the mainstream when the mainstream was, say, rabidly homophobic or racist in a way that it no longer is. And it recalls that power comes from the shadows and the margins, that our hope is in the dark around the edges, not the limelight of center stage. Together, we're very powerful, and we have a seldom told, seldom remembered history of victories and transformations that can give us confidence that, yes, we can change the world because we have many times before. You row forward, looking back, and telling this history is part of helping people navigate toward the future. We need a litany, a rosary, a sutra, a mantra, a war chant of our victories. The past is set in daylight, and it can become a torch we carry into the night that is the future. And with that, we will transition into our offering. This is the time when we work to support this community, and there are several ways to do that. If you are online, you will see a link appear in the chat box. If you are here in person, the greeters will pass the plate. If this is your first or second time with us, please feel free to let the plate pass you, because your presence is a gift to us and we're grateful that you are here. And with that, let's begin.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. To be aware and engaged these days, to be a lover of democracy, of our imperiled planet, of humanity at its finest is to absorb one blow after another, it seems, always with more in the offing. Think about what has hit us in recent years: the demise of important constitutional protections, bad news on climate change, threats to elections and democracy, so much anger and hostility in our politics. The appalling war in Ukraine drags on with the destruction of life and life supporting infrastructure. It seems there's always another mass shooting, another new variant of the coronavirus, another new record temperature, another Black person dead at the hands of police. There's always the next outrageous thing that some political figure or social media figure is saying or doing, fueling our cynicism, anger, and depression. We reel, many of us, as we're hit by news about attacks on libraries, attacks on the humanity of LGBTQ people and Jewish people and people of color, about attacks on teaching school kids a full and honest version of the country's history. And on it goes. We might think that only naive dreamers would talk about something as airy and sunny and wishful thinking oriented as hope in such a time. It's steely realism that's needed now, isn't it? If anyone is succumbing to cynicism or simply shutting their eyes and ears, giving up, well, who can blame them? Such thinking will not abide. Not only is hope available right now, it is required if we are to summon and sustain the energy we need to heed the call of responsible, intelligent, humane citizenship. Our hope is what the forces of illiberalism are trying to crush. Hope, whether we activate it in religious or secular ways, whether we summon it from theistic or non-theistic sources, is one of the most profound stands we can take. As with numerous things in the public discourse, the word hope has different meanings. I find that it's frequently misunderstood and misrepresented. Let me explain what I mean by hope today, starting with an explanation of what I don't mean. In everyday conversation, someone might say, "Man, I hope the Knicks win tonight," or "Wow, I really hope it doesn't snow this weekend when we're going for that long drive." Whether the context is sports or weather or some other area of life, this is a common way that the H word appears in daily conversation. It treats hope as something akin to wishing. The person doing the hoping and wishing has no agency. Such is the understanding of hope that drives articles like a New York Times piece that I came across recently, headlined "The Case Against Hope." As the writer, Roxane Gay, put it, quote, "I don't traffic in hope. Realism is more my ministry than is unbridled optimism. Hope is too ineffable and far too elusive. Hope allows us to leave what is possible in the hands of others. So much of what is possible is, in fact, in our hands," end quote. And my reaction is, unbridled optimism? Who said anything about unbridled optimism? Alas, the writer's conflation of hope and optimism is common. The two are not the same, however, or at stake than mere semantics. Here is the crucial distinction that has emerged for me in my reading and contemplation and the discussions I've had about optimism and hope in humanist circles. Optimism is a confidence that desired outcomes will come to pass. It's a confidence that's based on observable trend lines, maybe key advantages working in one's favor. It's based on what we see and know. Hope comes from someplace else, someplace that's not so easy to see and not so dependent on the ups and downs of a given season or the resources we have in hand. It's It's a source that's always there, no matter how bad the circumstances might look. It comes from an astute form of not knowing, echoes of Rebecca Solnit, of admitting that we don't know. That sounds weird, right? Not knowing is good. I mean it though, it is. And let me explain a little bit more what I mean by that. When people are disappointed by an outcome, I find that we often seek refuge in being smart enough to know that the bad thing was coming. In sports, it might be, darn, I knew our team was going to blow that big lead. That's me, I'm a very negative sports fan. Or in politics, it might be, well, of course our political opponents succeeded in doing this or that sinister thing because that's who they are and that's how things go in this messed up world. It's a kind of cynical consolation. It's a very thin one, though. So we're unhappy about what's happened, but we think we can glean an ounce of grim satisfaction from knowing we're street smart and hip enough to know how things really are. We knew better than to get our hopes up, so score one for us. We're not chumps. However, when it comes to the state of the world and where things are going, this kind of knowing deludes us. It exaggerates how much we know. It assumes too much, assuming, among other fallacies, that the current set of social givens will hold forever. It assumes that the current paradigm or framework is set in place and will never break. I have an example for you from this past summer and fall. So many people and political experts, you remember, so many of them, people on both sides of the aisle, were taking it as a given that the midterm elections were going to go a certain way. Why was this? Because of a pattern observed over several decades, one in which the opposition party cleans up in the midterm elections when the president is unpopular, bad stuff is happening in the economy, and so on. This pattern was treated as something like an immutable law of the universe. High gas prices, high inflation, low approval ratings for the president. These could mean only one thing, right? Their mistake was failing to recognize that paradigms change. In fact, midterm election dynamics are changing. The prognosticators failed to recognize that the supposed givens were not really givens. They didn't see that the country is making a transition to a different political era or paradigm, one that's marked by polarization and fear of democracy being torn down, and the taking away of cherished rights and fears about extremism. These factors are motivating people to vote in elections they would have sat out in the past, and to vote in ways different from how they would have voted in the past. As I wrote last summer in one of my columns, if the election was going to conform to the predictions, it wouldn't be due to some immutable law of the universe. It would be due to millions of human beings making decisions and taking actions or not. As such, Roxane Gay's case against hope is actually an argument for it. Better outcomes are possible, and it's in our hands. It's our responsibility to create them. Many of the things that make us scared or feeling resigned are not as formidable, not as likely to advance and win the future as we might think in our low moments. Those working to usher in a new era of authoritarianism and anti-democracy, they might not be as powerful and effective as we fear in our low moments. You know, there's this rush of blood to the head that we see among many people right now, people sprinting to outdo one another with ever more extreme positions and statements. These are disturbing to watch, but they are probably weakening this front as a viable political force. Good for us to remain vigilant, but there's no call to cower. Polling shows that a strong majority does not traffic in political craziness and damaging conspiracy theories. And as Bill McKibben writes, the extremism that shocks us and scares us is actually bad news for the right. You know, a conservative pundit probably could say much the same about extremism on the left. And, you know, I've heard them say that. McKibben sees it this way. Efforts to erode crucial rights after decades of slow and careful and patient nibbling away are suddenly rushing ahead full tilt. This is dangerous for the country, yes, but it's also dangerous for the political fortunes of candidates or parties who are closest to these efforts, repelling would-be supporters and weakening their chances of winning politically. And I agree with that. But let's go deeper now on this concept of knowing and not knowing and how they relate to hope. And let me start with another telling example. There's a writer I know, he's a fellow contributor to Only Sky, which is the magazine I write for now, who's convinced that the 2024 election is going to go a certain way. And it'll be the end of America as we know it. He treats this scenario like a fact, like he knows it will happen. And judging from a piece that he wrote on this, he's already living the emotions that go with this nightmare, like it's already real, like it's already happened. The fact is, he doesn't know that his nightmare will come true. No one knows how future elections are going to go or how the biggest conflicts and issues of our time are going to play out. And the fact that we don't know is, in a way, good news. I'm serious. Not knowing in this context can be really good. This epistemological humility that I'm talking about, not only is it justified and wise, but it disables the forces in our psyche that can be so disabling and so disempowering. As we heard a moment ago, as Rebecca Solnit puts it, in that spaciousness of uncertainty, there is room to act. It seems odd to say this, but sometimes it's empowering to acknowledge our not knowing, especially when we think we know everything and our supposed knowledge lures us into throwing up our hands or hanging our heads in despair. The fact is, we don't know what will happen next week, much less next decade or the decade after that. And if we don't know, then it follows that we don't know that the future will be terrible. We can't know, not for sure, that the future, at least parts of it, can't be brilliant. Our knowledge of the future is severely occluded by the givens of the present, but we can be sure that the current formulas and trend lines and dynamics are not destined to continue. What fuels hope is the realization that all sorts of things can change in ways that we can't see coming, in ways that might be galling and frightening, yes, but also positive and exciting. There is such a thing as a pleasant surprise. The threats that we see today, the national and global problems that worry us and make us fear the future, perhaps they're best seen not as a new inhumane dispensation settling in for the long run, but rather the kicking and screaming of an old dispensation that is losing its grip and ending. As written by the author and pundit Anand Giridharadas, the chaos we see is, quote, not the beginning of something. This is the chaos of the end of something, end quote. So we don't know what's developing outside our field of vision, outside of our knowing, but we can be sure it's a lot. And it can manifest suddenly as a glorious surprise, a so-called overnight success. Neither the rapid advance of LGBTQ rights, nor the fall of the Berlin Wall, you could think of many other examples, seemed likely until it happened. Overnight successes, of course, are rarely as quote unquote overnight as they appear. Often they are the sudden bearing of fruit by trees that have been cultivated for decades. Again, to use Rebecca Solnit's wisdom and her famous metaphor, mushrooms that appear suddenly above ground didn't come out of nowhere. They are a manifestation of vast networks of underground fungi that have been there all along, out of view, but ready to spring forth. Hope is always possible. And as long as life is moving and morphing and adapting and creating and pulsating the way that life does, hope will remain possible, and it cannot be crushed. Hope is more than possible, it's necessary. We need it. Hope sets our sights. Hope identifies and declares what is good, what is worth dreaming about, and what is worth fighting for. It generates and directs our energy. We need hope because without it, we are sunk. Without hope, we could easily fall prey to why bother? You know, we might manage to grit our teeth and slog forward with our fatalism, doing what we think is right, determined to be on the right side of the losing battle. We might maintain our grim march for a while. But to fall into hopelessness is to give up on the idea that something better is possible, that there are solutions to our problems and injustices. Hopelessness saps our will to work. To give up hope is to take a big step towards surrender. Hope is a fuel, and for non-theistic people, there is no need for gods or miracles to provide it. Just the empowering awareness that history is full of surprises, horrible but wonderful too, and we can't be sure there won't be more of the latter in the years and decades ahead. Not if enough of us keep pushing for the new world that's on the verge of dawning. There will be technological breakthroughs, shifts in consciousness, generational changings of the guard. Great new ideas will emerge and some great old ideas will finally gain traction. Bad deeds will backfire. There could be turning point moments, akin to when Joseph Welch put McCarthy and McCarthyism in their place with his famous, "Have you no sense of decency?" These won't happen because they are inevitable. They'll happen because people will do them. We will make them happen. I'd like to close now with hopeful words from the philosophizing punk rocker Joe Strummer, frontman of The Clash. Y'all like that band, The Clash? Good. As the late Strummer said, the future is unwritten, which I take to mean that nothing is a given, nothing is a fait accompli. That very much includes the nightmare scenarios that might afflict us in our down moments. The nightmares don't have to become reality. We must make sure that they don't. We can write a better story, one that's worthy of our humanity. And we each have a part to play in shaping that story and bringing it to life. Thank you.
We'll now extinguish our chalice, and I invite you to join me with the words that are on the screen and in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and out into the world until we are together again. And now we will move on to our hymn of celebration. It's an old favorite. It was requested specifically for today. Number 346, Come Sing a Song with Me. The words are on the screen, or you can use your hymnal. Please rise as you are able.
Today's closing words are from Yu Tong, a 20th century Chinese inventor, writer, and philosopher. Hope is like a road in the country. There was never a road, but when many people walk on it, the road comes into existence.
One look at love and you may see it weaves a web over mystery. All raveled threads can rend apart, for hope has a place in the lover's heart. Hope has a place in the lover's heart. Whispering world, a sigh of sighs, the ebb, the flow of the ocean tides. One breath, one word may end or may start. A hope in a place of the lover's heart. Hope has a place in the lover's heart. Look to love and you may dream, and if it should leave, then give it wings. But if such love is meant to be, hope is home and the heart is free. Under the heavens we journey far on roads of life. We're the wanderers So let love rise, let love depart, let hope have a place in the lover's heart. Hope has a place in the lover's